Hey everybody, welcome to John's Briefs here at Active Self-Protection Extra. Today, part 3 of the Harold Fish case in the state of Arizona. And in particular, in a more generalized case, I want to talk about the job of the judge and how even good people can make mistakes. Firearms Legal Protection just started a 100% free monthly newsletter to bring quality, accurate information about legal self-defense to good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people like you. Go sign up for free, no-hassle help for your self-defense at the link in the description and thank them for sponsoring today's lesson. So go watch the first 2 parts of this and about, in particular, what happened to Harold Fish, how it went down. He, ended up having to shoot a guy while he was out on a hike, was convicted of second-degree murder. That got overturned in the Arizona Supreme Court. In particular, the court felt that one of the jury instructions and some of the exclusion of evidence were inappropriate. And because of those two, those were non-trivial errors. So they remanded, they reversed the conviction, sent it back to the court, and sent it on another day. But today I want to talk about why that is and what happened. So first of all, let's talk about the different levels of court. We have a trial court. First of all, we're just talking about criminal courts here, right? And again, you guys know I'm not an attorney, but I study this stuff. I'm a geek about this stuff. I'm a law self-defense verified instructor. I am a deadly force instructor certified by the Masada U group, all that stuff, right? So this is, I love this stuff and I want to educate you about it. So this is why I find out about it, even though Terry's not going to get me to go to law school. In the criminal system, we're talking specifically at the state level here. Federal is similar, but it's kind of its own system off to the side. You have a trial court, then you have an appellate court, and you have finally a Supreme Court is kind of the structure. So the purpose here of the trial court is to decide how the facts fit the law. So the way that things go down is you have 2 attorneys, you have a defense and a prosecution, who are arguing to a finder of fact. Now the finder of fact might be a jury, the finder of fact might be a judge if you have a bench trial. So a bench trial is before a judge. In a case like Harold Fish's, he had an 8-member jury. The jury can be anywhere from 8 to 12 people, generally speaking. So the attorneys are arguing to the finder of fact to say these things happened, and according to the laws of our land and what we have, they did match those laws, or the actions did not match those laws. And if the actions did not match those laws, then we're breaking the law. Then we apply the punishments of the established law. So the 2 attorneys are arguing that to the finder of fact, to the jury. What the judge is doing is the judge is the umpire. The judge beforehand and during makes sure that the attorneys follow the rules for how the game is played. He really, or she really is like an umpire in baseball. They're supposed to call balls and strikes and say, you can do that thing, you can't do that thing. So both sides go through this whole process of discovery. What's your evidence? What are you going to argue? How are you going to do that? They're going to lay out everything that they know, every bit of evidence that they have to each other. Prosecution has to do that for the defense. That's not like a courtesy or nothing, right? Go watch My Cousin Vinny and you'll see that. Then what happens is the judge will say, okay, so this evidence is admissible, this one is not. In Harold's case in particular, his attorneys wanted to get evidence that the victim, the guy that he shot, was aggressive and mean-spirited, particularly about dogs. And that he had a history of aggression. And federal evidentiary rules 404, which Arizona has very, very similar, say that character, generally speaking, is inadmissible unless it's known to the defendant or it is particularly salient to the case because it speaks to actions. But even if you have those, you're still going to have to show that the actions of the moment were objectively reasonable or not. So character, generally speaking, is removed. That's other things like that. Is this evidence salient or is it not? Is it admissible or is it not? Is it actually what we want to have in the case? Is it fair to admit this evidence or is it not? So the judge is going to make those decisions. They're basically appealable, but after the trial. So the attorney says, man, I'm going to appeal this verdict after this based on these things. And sometimes we see trials where we go, man, this thing happened. That's going to get an immediate appeal because that's going to be an inappropriate thing. Then the next level comes. So once the jury decides yes or no, back up. Once the evidence is then submitted and both sides rest their case, the jury's given instructions. And those instructions say, here's basically how the law says in plain English how you have to decide. Well, in the case of the jury for Harold Fish, they asked several questions of the judge. The judge basically didn't give him any more information. He said, nope, it was in your instructions. They wanted to know something like to define what an attack is. They wanted to know, define what reasonable is, and the judge wouldn't. He just said, no, refer to your existing instructions. The Harold Fish's attorneys wanted the jury instruction to include what self-defense was and what a reasonable person would be expected in self-defense. The judge said no. The Supreme Court disagreed with that. So again, the judge is going to try to make sure that the fairness is followed and the best evidence gets to the jury. The jury is properly educated on the law, and so then therefore the jury of peers gets to make the decision. In a perfect world, that's exactly how it works. But of course, if we have a conviction, now if you get an acquittal, we're done. If you get an acquittal, the jury says not guilty, double jeopardy says prosecution can't try him again in that, and we're done, at least at the state level. Federal charges for other things is something different. However, if convicted, then his or her, the defendant's, the now convict's lawyers can appeal that. Now, they can't appeal the facts. So the appellate courts, the next level above that, they don't get to say, well, this happened or this didn't happen. Those are established in the trial, and the trial has a full transcript of what actually happened. What the appeals process is were the rules properly applied? Was the right evidence allowed? Were the right rules followed? Were the right jury instructions allowed? Was the jury allowed to be prejudiced in some way? Was the right jury chosen? So all these things are procedural. So what the appeal asks is, did the umpire the game fairly? If the umped the game fairly, or if they made minor mistakes, everybody's gonna make minor mistakes, right? They make minor mistakes that didn't affect the outcome, then the appellate court will say, nope, it stands, they did the right thing, this is okay. If it's wrong, well then they can remand that decision. They can say, nope, you screwed that up, judge, go back, follow our directions, you needed to do this a different way, go back and retry this case using this other standard. In this case, that didn't happen at the appellate court. The appellate court said, no, we feel like he did a good job. Of course, there's a court higher than that, a Supreme Court. Now, of course, what we should have is that the appellate courts are built from judges who are the best judges that we have at the trial level. Then they get chosen for the appeals courts because they're highly experienced and highly competent. The very best of those should be chosen again for the Supreme Court. So we have our very best legal minds who make sure that everybody's playing fair. They should be on the side of the people. They should make sure that justice is done. This is their world, right? And I think for the most part, that's actually what happens. So then the Supreme Court decides, wait a minute, if we have especially appellate courts who are handling all kinds of cases, if we have any disagreement or if we have differing ideas on that among different appeals courts, then the Supreme Court will then take that on as a final arbiter of was this fair or not. In the case of Harold Fish, the Supreme Court said no, even the appeals court was wrong about what they did. What the judge did was incorrect in these couple of areas, go back and retry it. So then it didn't happen. They chose not to retry it because the law had changed, and the law had changed in a way that greatly benefited Harold Fish. That's kind of how those work and where the judge is and what those different judges do. Now, how does that help you day to day? Recognize that entire appeals process for Harold Fish took 3 years while he was sitting in prison and cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, of course, every day you're sitting in prison is a bad day. And not only are you not making an income, whatever it was you were doing. Now Harold was a retired school teacher, so I don't think they took his pension away for that. So I think his wife was still able to pay their bills and those kinds of things. But some places that's not the case. If you get convicted, you don't get to continue to draw your pension. But I think that obviously all that money coming out costs significant amounts. So we want to stay away from trial if we can. And I think Harold Fish's story teaches us that we want to stay away from it if we possibly can. Because after 3 years, he finally got out of prison. And guess what? The state didn't pay him back for all his time lost. The state didn't pay him back for his attorney's fees or anything like that. He was the one who was out for all of that. So make sure that you're covered. I'd suggest Firearms Legal Protection for that for a reason, and I'd really suggest you have that. Now, Harold was vindicated. In the end, justified conduct, was treated in a justified manner, and so some people look at that and they go, hey, it's a win, so no harm, no foul. I think there was a lot of harm here. I think Harold paid with 3 years of his life. I think that you know, for every night of his life, he had to think about, did I do the right thing here? And I can imagine every night in prison him going, gosh, I felt like I did the right thing. Why am I sitting in here for murder? But recognize you only use deadly force when there's no other options, when the alternative options are so incomprehensibly bad that you can't have them. But out of today's video, I wanted you to understand, how does this appeals process work? What is the judge's responsibility? And I want you to look at the judge from here on out as a referee, as the umpire, as the one who makes sure that the rules are followed, while the attorneys argue to the finder of fact. And then the higher judges are the umpires of the umpire to make sure that they're calling balls and strikes successfully. Hope it helps you.